She is a woman, but not 100%. I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, a arbitration body called the Court of Arbitration for Sport today has handed down a ruling that says that for a woman to compete as a woman in athletics or in track specifically, that they're going to have to take drugs to suppress their testosterone levels if they're above a certain point. Now, this ruling was apparently aimed specifically at a runner from South Africa whose name is Caster Semenya. I don't know how to pronounce that, Semenya, who has been somewhat dominant when she has entered races where she runs against other women. And that sparked the comment from Pierre Weiss, the general secretary of one of track's leading governing bodies, saying she is a woman, but maybe not 100%. This is an interesting situation because this isn't a person who has actually is going through some sort of transgender operation or transitioning to be the other sex. This is someone who, at least by outward appearance, was born female. There is some indication, although not confirmed stories, that this person was then discovered to have internal male organs. And at the very least, even if that turns out not to be the case, has had very high levels of testosterone. Bill, first of all, this sounds like something that was not of her own doing and not a guy trying to force his way into a woman's sport, but actually somebody who thinks she is a woman, was born apparently a woman. What's wrong with letting her compete as a woman? There are variations of all kinds among individual women.
This one's a little more interesting than usual. This individual case, there is a test that could be performed to determine whether or not this individual should be allowed to compete in women's sports. At least this is the first test that they should be able to pass, and that is to take any sample of fingernail, hair, blood, skin, anything, and see if there are two X chromosomes. And if there are not, then it's not a woman, and that's the end of that story. So until we know the answer to that test, that's the beginning. It's got nothing to do with external appearances, got nothing to do with how you were raised, how you identify, whether you like pink over blue. No, there's a very simple digital binary on and off. We're not talking about gender now. We're talking about sex. We're talking about your biological sex. So that would be the first test. And if you can't pass the double X chromosome test, then I don't think you should be in women's sports, because women's sports are designed so that women can compete. If men were allowed to compete with women, then there would be no women's sports. Sorry to be the bearer of this news, ladies, but it's a fact. Every single high school in America has at least 2 or 3 male runners, 15, 16, 17-year-old boys who are faster than the fastest woman ever lived, ever. FloJo, I want to say 88 for the record. So, any of this encroachment by biological males into women's sports is not an act of moral goodness, and it's not an act of moral tolerance or any of this nonsense. What it is cheating female athletes who have worked their entire lives to become the very best in their category, in their fields, and it is cheating them out of it by the same progressives who've been talking about female empowerment for all these years. So really now the Democratic progressive position, I'm coming to the specific case. The Democratic progressive position is, we think women ought to be women's sports is great. And also, any man that wants to run as a woman should be able to absolutely, immediately, totally defeat any effort on the part of all those millions and millions and millions and millions of excellent, superb female athletes. So there's that little conundrum to resolve. Now, in the case of this individual, if it turns out that this person has dual X chromosomes and through some birth defect, and that's what it is, it's not a pejorative term, it's simply a birth defect. If you're a female and you have internal male organs, that's a birth defect. If it turns out that the presence of those internal male organs has created enough testosterone to make this person unbeatable, then no, she doesn't get to compete. Not in my world anyway, because it's not just the testosterone. It's the biomechanical leverage. If you have a person who is born a male and let's say they go through all of the transgender operations and the hormones and all the rest of it, okay, and you bleach all the testosterone out of this person's body and so on, you've still got a male skeletal structure where the leverage, the hip structure, all of this stuff is mechanically faster. And this is not something that can be changed. And to say that this makes me either anti-woman or anti-trans is just plain ridiculous. I just think that women's sports should be for women and men's sports should be for men. And if you don't believe that, then you have just brought about the end of women's sports.
Well, Bill, it was an interesting ruling because it was a 2-1 ruling, first of all, so it wasn't unanimous from the Court of Arbitration for Sport. The second thing is that the two in the majority acknowledged that the practice of forcing these kinds of athletes to take testosterone-suppressant drugs is discriminatory, but necessary to preserve women's sport.
Hold on. Is this, do we know, is this an XX or an XY individual? Is that information?
We do not know, but let's put her aside.
Of course we don't know because that's the only thing that matters.
But let's put that athlete aside because this is going to affect other athletes. Anybody who tests with a very high level of testosterone will have to bring their level, and it's a 6-month advance, by the way. Before you can compete, you have to be able to get your level of testosterone down for 6 months before you can run that race.
So now you see what the progressives have done to the world, Scott. Now it's not a question of having 9 women lining up in the Olympics to see who the fastest woman alive is. Now it's a question of having 9 individuals whose testosterone levels are within official error bars, trying to determine who the fastest male, female, or hybrid is in the world. This is where all of this stuff inevitably ends up. This is where the virtue signaling of it ends up. As far as this individual person is concerned, if they feel like they're being cheated, well, I am genuinely sorry for you. As a person who was cheated out of my goal in life of being a fighter pilot by poor eyesight in my left eye, not very poor either, by the way, I found that was really kind of a hard blow to take. But to say that it's unfair is not to understand the nature of life. Life owes you nothing. You are dealt a hand of cards, and it's your job to either play the hand, improve the hand, or fold. That's it. So if you have a biological advantage that is unavailable to other women, even if you are an XX female, a sexually female individual, and you have the ability to generate internal testosterone through a birth defect, that disqualifies you from women's sports.
Let me give you an example of a quote that Semenya, the runner, and her supporters would describe as discriminatory, irrational, and unjustifiable. This comes from Dorianne Lamballe, I don't know how you pronounce that, Lamballe Coleman, who's a professor of law at Duke University, but was a former 800-meter runner in the 1980s. And she told the New York Times last year, and Times trots out this quote again this year, that, quote, advocates for intersex athletes like to say that sex doesn't divide neatly. This may be true in gender studies departments, but at least for competitive sport purposes, they are simply wrong. Sex in this context is easy to define, and the lines are cleanly drawn. You either have testes and testosterone in the male range, or you don't.
Okay. So what argument is this person bringing to the table? The best possible argument that they could bring, let's just assume the best possible argument. Let's assume that this person was born with 2 X chromosomes, biologically female, through some kind of birth defect, has internal organs that are generating unusually high levels of testosterone. That means that as a female athlete, she is competing with levels of testosterone that female athletes who are not doping themselves externally, and I'm not suggesting that this person is cheating, that's just the way their body is, I understand that. But if this individual, because of a birth defect, has levels of testosterone that are above those attainable by women under fair training regimens, then there is a biological unfair advantage that is conferred upon this person. It doesn't matter whether they're taking testosterone externally or whether it's being generated internally. They are essentially doping themselves up, and that should disqualify them from the category, because if it doesn't, that person's going to win everything.
Well, that runner from South Africa, by the way, says, I just want to run naturally the way I was born. It's not fair that I'm told I must change. It's not fair to the people who question who I am.
You're right. It isn't fair. It's not fair. You're right. It's not fair. Absolutely absolutely not fair. And it's not fair for all the people out there who are 5'8" and want to be NBA basketball stars either. It's not fair for all the people who weigh 200 pounds and are husky who wanted to be jockeys their entire lives. It's not fair to them either. Nothing is fair. This idea that I have to have the entire rules of the entire planet, all of the sports rules throughout all of human history rewritten for me because my feelings are hurt is the end of civilization. I've had enough of it. I don't care if your feelings are hurt. I don't care. I'm sorry for you. I can relate, but I don't care. Your personal feelings of being hurt and life not being fair is no reason to deprive millions and millions and millions, half the planet essentially, of their opportunity to compete in sports fairly just because you don't want to get your feelings hurt.
To stretch your analogy, Bill, this is let's say it's a female basketball player who's being told she can't compete because she's 8 feet tall.
No, that's not the same thing.
Because that's what she's saying. She's saying, I was born this way. I'm superior to others. My body produces this chemical.
Whoa. If you can have a female basketball player born 8 feet tall, and this female basketball player, if she's born 8 feet tall,
well, she may grow up to be 8 feet tall.
Hang on, and she's 8 foot tall woman basketball player, and she's got 2 X chromosomes, and there's no internal source of testosterone generation in her body, and she's not being taking any drugs to dope that up, then she is 100% able to compete and will win everything and certainly deserves to.
But that's just another kind of biological advantage. What's the difference between height and testosterone content?
No. Nice try, but no. What you're talking about in the case of the 8 foot tall women basketball players, you're talking about a case of natural deviation across the bell curve of possible female heights, well within the range of being fair to the degree that it is an XX female and this person has not had their performance altered by external or internal artificial means. They are not being artificially changed. This is how they're born. This is how they grew up. These are actual women, and it's an 8 foot tall basketball playing woman. And frankly, if this 8 foot tall basketball playing woman was good enough and wanted to play in the NBA, I'd be all in favor of that. I think that would be utterly fantastic. I would love to see it. Love it. I would think that would be just grand.
But this sports arbitration body is picking an arbitrary point on the testosterone range
scale. Precisely. And so now the winner of the race will be determined by a team of scientists in lab coats drawing blood samples to determine whose testosterone levels are artificially high, but not so artificially high so that they go over this little bar that they've managed to put in there. I think there should be, and I'm not the first person to think of this. Most comedians think this is actually clever. I've heard George Carlin talk about this and a bunch of other people. If you want to have an athletic league where you just dope the living hell out of people and you want to make linebackers who are 600 pounds and 9 feet tall, I say I'm all for it. Do it. Great, fantastic. But if you're going to try to take something like the Olympics, which is presumably at some level, an institution that has the honor of history through it so that records can be compared to each other and somebody can say, I broke this record. I ran faster than the first guy who ran the 4-minute mile. If you want that to mean anything, and I do, and all athletes do, all real athletes do, all real athletes know that they have to have standards. All real athletes want to have accurate times on their runs because they don't want to win by cheating. A real athlete could not bear to win a gold medal that they won by cheating. No. The timer was off.
Let me try to solve this.
We cut a second off of your time.
Let me try to cut this Gordian knot because she really came to the attention of the world populace when at the age of 18, competing in a world competition in the 800 meters, she won by more than 2 seconds, which if you've ever watched track and field, you know that that's an eternity because these races are decided by hundredths and sometimes a tenth of a second. So she won by 2 seconds. What if we measured people's testosterone levels?
Hold on. Essentially, whoa. Let's just stop right there for 1 second. I want to get to your question, but let's just stop right there for 1 second. Let's say that we allow this, and let's say that because her feelings are hurt and she wants to be able to run naturally, and let's just assume for the sake of the argument that it's a double X individual. I'm not convinced of that, but let's just say it is. So this person has a birth defect that generates excessively high levels of testosterone because she actually has male internal organs,
Possibly.
well, no, not possibly. That's what she's saying.
No. She's not, like, nobody can confirm that. It is alleged that she may have.
How hard is it to confirm? I can confirm it in 30 seconds. I can confirm it with an ultrasound. I don't need to even do an MRI. How hard is it to confirm?
Because it's her private health information, and it's not necessarily something that she has, but she has been subjected to what she would call humiliating sex tests.
So now every single female athlete on planet Earth is going to have to take one step down on the podium. Every single one of them is going to have to take a step down on the podium and be beaten by 2 seconds because one person makes an assertion that is not supported by any evidence and complains that if you don't allow me to anonymously run and not reveal why my testosterone levels are so high, I might in fact be a man, but that's none of your business. It's my business, and how dare you ask me what an incredibly racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic thing. If you want to destroy all of sports in that vein, progressives, and I know you do because you have to. You have to. Progressives have to believe in this because the person that is running is more of a victim than the 4 billion women that don't have this problem and the hundreds of millions of women who are involved in athletics. You see, this person has her feelings hurt, and that trumps all of these other people whose feelings are not hurt. So this one person is now going to be at the front of every podium, get every single gold medal, and everybody else is going to have to move down one. And then what will happen, Scott, is there will be the Olympics will begin. We are already entering the period of the asterisk. That's what it is. It's going to be the period of the asterisk. Gold medal, doom, dink, way down here. This runner has abnormally high levels of testosterone. It is not known whether or not she's a genetically female athlete, and the source of these testosterone additions were not revealed because this was a private health matter on the part of the individual, and whose feelings would be deeply hurt if they were to be revealed.
So we have to get this thing across the finish line. So let me just ask you this question and see if this would resolve it for you. In each of the runners...
Let's stop right there. I'm not going down that path. I'm going to stop right there. Before the race starts, the first thing we're going to do is make sure that everybody we are talking about has 2 X chromosomes. That's where we're going to start. Okay? That's the definition of a biological woman. It has nothing to do with gender. It has nothing to do with attraction. It has nothing to do with sexuality. Biologically, any single cell sample from any single individual on this planet can tell you whether or not that is a male or a female. So the first test we're going to have, Scott, is a test to determine that everybody in question in this field of runners has a double X chromosome and makes them biologically female. Now proceed.
But that's not the question being adjudicated in this particular story.
Well, that's because the world is
understand that's
insane.
A fair point. So let's just say before each race, we measure the testosterone levels in each competitor and handicap them. And so in order for this woman who has a off the charts level of testosterone in her system, in order for her to be declared the winner, there's an amount of time that she has to beat in order to be declared in first place. In other words, she has to finish 2 seconds ahead of everybody else to be considered first place. If she finishes a second and a half, she's not first place.
We'll add 2 seconds. We'll have to add 2 seconds to her time.
Or subtract 2 seconds, however you look at that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, add 2 seconds to her time. Because if she finishes at 8 seconds and the women finish at 10 seconds, you have to add 2 seconds to her time. So that's her handicap.
But if my testosterone level is at 3 nanomoles and hers is at 7 nanomoles, then I get 2 seconds added to my time.
Well, what if you only have half of the testosterone difference that she does? Does that mean you only get a 1 second handicap?
Yes.
And what happens, Scott? What happens if you find out that, wait a minute, now we're done the math on this, and it turns out that the sweet spot is 3.5 times the 3.5 seconds. In other words, we're going to take this individual, we're going to dope them so full of testosterone that they're going to be penalized 3.5 seconds. Nevertheless, that much extra testosterone is still going to win the race by half a second. So that's how we'll do that. This is the world that the progressives have given us. This is the world that the progressives continue to foist on us, and the insanity of it is evident to anybody who's looking at it. And the fact that one person's feelings is going to eliminate the entire competitive structure of half of the planet because this one person who reveals nothing about the details of this as if it mattered anyway has their feelings hurt is an indication of the progressive world that we find ourselves in. And if this kind of appeal to base emotion, if that's all this is, if we turn ourselves into a species of 3-year-olds whoever cries the loudest and has their feelings hurt the most gets what they want, then we deserve everything that's coming our way, but I'm not going to stand for it. You're not going to stand for it. People with sensibility aren't going to stand for it. This has got nothing to do with prejudice against transgendered people or anything else. If she says, oh, I just like to run naturally the way I was born, well, if you're born with an X and a Y chromosome and you want to run in women's category, no. And if that hurts your feelings and then that's not fair, well, welcome to planet Earth, where nothing is essentially fair. You're not owed fairness. The world does not owe you a life where your feelings don't get hurt, and you have no moral authority whatsoever. You were the people foisting this entire farce on humanity to tell half of the population of athletes on this planet that everything that they do is going to be negated because one person doesn't want their feelings hurt.
Bringing the news of the day before the tribunal of conservative principle, Bill Whittle now comes to you 5 days a week, thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com who have clicked that Become a Member link. If you're not one of those yet, you really ought to be, especially if you're still watching at this point in this show. Come on, you're one of us, and you know it. Go ahead and go to BillWhittle.com and click that Become a Member link. So for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members for making this possible.